Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention. Maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. G'day, and welcome to this special episode of Voice of Gord. I don't normally release 2 shows in a week, but I had a very special guest just speak with me now, that being United States Congressman representing New Jersey's 2nd District, Jefferson Van Drew. Congressman Van Drew is the co-sponsor of a bill before Congress, very near and dear to my heart and should be of interest to many of my listeners, that being the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act. The bill is pretty simple. It seeks to remove the exemption in the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act, which prevents myself and yourselves from being paid overtime. There's been very little information in the media on that bill, so I've taken it upon myself to write on it. If you go in the show description, I will include links to articles I've written on the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act in Newsweek and in the American Conservative. I did a follow-up piece to both of those in my own Substack, autonomoustruckers.substack.com. You guys can go and check out all the arguments and why I think this bill should pass. I hope you enjoy this presentation with the Congressman, who very generously gave me a few minutes of his time to discuss that bill. Other news and announcements from the show. I have quite a few guests in the pipe coming for you. One you might know is from Twitter. His name's Huntsman, sort of a supply chain and logistics professional. We should be recording this weekend coming. I also will be speaking with a young lady in Toronto named Delia Forno, who's a public school teachers union representative, and we will be discussing the disconnect between certain parts of the labor movement and people who work for a living. That should be very interesting, amongst other things we are going to discuss. Previously recorded shows that will also be dropping very soon. One with Chase Barber, who was just on Odd Lots podcast discussing his company Edison Motors and his hybrid diesel-electric logging and vocational trucks. I also have a recorded show with my very good friend Gavin Smith, who is a Kiwi trucker and just all-around legend. Did quite a few seasons up on the ice. His life story is amazing, and I can't wait to share it with you. I also recorded a show with a young lady in Nova Scotia by the name of Jessica Bonser, who works for Canadian Coast Guard and has had quite a career at sea. And we'll get to hear all about her life serving on vessels like oil tankers and rig tenders, and what life is like being a woman in a mostly male-dominated industry, especially locked up on a boat. So I really hope you guys enjoy all these upcoming episodes. Pay attention on all of your podcatchers. I'm on Spotify, Apple, Podverse, SoundCloud, and my own Substack. Again, autonomoustruckers.substack.com. As always, I'm keen to hear your feedback. You can email me gordylocks@protonmail.com or come and find me on Twitter @driverautonomy. All right, that's it for now. Please enjoy this presentation with United States Congressman Jefferson Van Drew. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Voice of Gord podcast. I'm Gord, and this is my voice. We have a very, very special guest this evening, someone who I've been looking to speak with for a little while. As far as I know, the only Republican co-sponsor to Representative Andy Levin's Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act bill, Congressman Jeff Van Drew, representing the 2nd District of New Jersey. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be with you.
Excellent. So, can you give us a little, for me and my listeners, a little history of yourself, a little history and information on the second district? Like, tell us all about yourself for a couple minutes.
You got it. So the second district is an interesting place. There's a lot of variety in all parts of it because you have the seashore and the coast, and then you have areas that are more urban, like Atlantic City. You have areas that are rural, like Salem County, and parts of Gloucester County and parts of Cumberland County. So I have the largest district actually in the state of New Jersey geographically.
Which is the south end. You're the very south end of New Jersey, correct?
Correct. It is South Jersey. It's about 40% of the state of New Jersey. And it is, like I said, a tremendous amount of variation and diversity in the area. So I've got 6 different counties. I have Atlantic County, Cape May County, Cumberland County, Salem County, parts of Gloucester County, good chunk of Gloucester County, a good chunk of Ocean County as well. So it certainly keeps me busy just driving. I can a tiny bit relate to what your folks do in trucking because I certainly don't drive those big rigs, and that's a lot harder. But I am used to driving a lot of distance back and forth and all over to get to reach people.
Right.
So
On that note, Congressman, originally our recording date was supposed to be Friday, and your assistant Allison was telling me that you got stuck in traffic, which is very ironic given I'm a truck driver and I'm at home, and you're a United States congressman, and even
well,
you, even you, a congressman, are subject to the whims of the highway.
absolutely, we all are. I guess if you drive for sure, and that was ironic. But then yeah, it was the whole traffic situation was horrible that day, and that happens sometimes. That's why it's difficult. We usually are able to work out dates and times, but sometimes other things interfere. There might be a caucus called, or there might be a vote session that you didn't expect, or you might have a traffic problem, but you always do your best with it. But in any event, so we've got this big district with all kinds of diversity, and a lot of farming and plenty of truck drivers and people certainly live in my district, and we're proud to have them. I'm going into my 3rd term in the United States Congress. Before that, I was a state senator for 10 years in the state of New Jersey. Before that, I was a state assemblyman for 6 years in the state of New Jersey. Before that, I was what they call now county commissioner. It used to be called freeholder in the state of New Jersey. And before that, I was a mayor. And before that, I was a councilman. So I've really served in a lot of different offices, which has been very helpful to me because I did it the hard way and I learned a lot. I learned a lot of the effect of what you do in the federal level at the top can really affect people all the way through the chain.
Yeah, that's quite a career, Congressman. Like all the way from being a local councilor through being a mayor, through being a state representative, and now in the highest halls of power in the world. That's quite a career path.
It was, and I really feel good that people always entrusted me as I moved forward. I feel my constituents moved forward with me, and it's been a good relationship. We like to do constituent services, like to speak my mind. I'm very outspoken. I say what I think, and I do what I feel. So that's, I think, a good thing, especially in today's times. And
On
it's been rewarding. Before,
on
and besides that, I just wanted to mention was during the other service that while I was, let me put it this way, while I was assemblyman and senator, etc., everything other than Congress, I was actually a dentist. So I also served as a dentist part-time.
Right, yes, because when you're sort of a more local politician, that's kind of a part-time gig, correct?
Correct.
Right.
which,
And
which is not
also,
true in Congress.
no, yeah, you got a lot on your plate. And speaking of your political career, you're one of the few politicians in America that's crossed the floor. You used to be a Democrat and now you're a Republican. Is that correct?
That is correct. So I was a Democrat. I was a conservative blue dog Democrat, which means that, you have a lot of conservative values. For example, I'm a gun owner. For example, I believe in the Constitution very strongly. I believe in America, America first. So all of these things are part of who I am. And, sometimes I didn't agree with the party, but more and more and more, I didn't agree with the party. And at this point, when I say the party, I mean the Democratic Party. I decided when they were really going after President Trump and insisted that every single Democrat had a vote to impeach him, and I wouldn't. It was at that point in time that I decided that it was time for me to move over to the Republican Party. Best thing I ever did. I'm happy I did it. I am a conservative, and I feel really comfortable with it. And by the way, one little historical fact. So there's been a handful of people who have done that through the years, moved from one party to another in Congress, but they always moved from the minority party to the majority party because they were usually getting a chairmanship or a better committee or whatever. I moved from the majority party to the minority party. That's how strongly I felt I needed to make that change.
Well, that's to your credit, Congressman. That's excellent and good for you. I would point out the reason we are talking. My podcast is mostly about trucking. I write on trucking related issues, and so we're going to speak about the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act, which was written by a Democrat. It was brought into Congress by previous Congressman Levin from Michigan, who has since been primaried out of his seat. It was co-sponsored by 5 other Democrats and you. So could you maybe tell us what made you reach across the floor to work with Congressman Levin, and what are the benefits you see in the Guaranteeing for Overtime for Truckers Act, and how does that square with now being in the Republican Party?
Well, what's been important to me is always to be fair to working people. People that just work hard for a living, whether they're in construction, whether they're truck drivers. Truck drivers work really, really hard. That's a tough job. I mean, when I'm on the road and I look at, especially some of these 18 wheelers that you guys, have to wheel around and get into tight spots and back up and do the things that you do. It really does amaze me. It's a special talent, it's a gift, and it's hard work. And I just think that they should be treated fairly. And, I believe that bill, it doesn't do anything certainly other than guarantee that they are treated fairly, that if you are working overtime, if you're spending hours waiting for the supplies that you're supposed to get or to unload, and somebody hasn't been careful enough to make sure that they're there to get that done in a timely way, that if you're going to lose those hours of time, certainly as a trucker, then you deserve to get paid for that, and you deserve to get overtime for that, because it really is overtime. And so, I felt comfortable with it, and I thought it was something that had value. And if I believe, unlike most of the other bills that they're doing, quite frankly, on the other side, which I don't think have had much value, I think that this did, and I supported it. And my name is on there as the first co-sponsor.
Right. And do you know, it's hard to get information on how bills sort of work. I'm a political neophyte. I'm not 100% clued in, and most of my listeners wouldn't be either, although most of my listeners are pretty smart. The inner workings of Congress can be a bit alien to people. So maybe you could update us on where exactly the bill is in, and as I understand it, it's still in committee, how the committee works. What are the chances of the bill passing now that we've just gone through midterms and the composition of Congress looks a bit different than it did a few months ago? And then any news you might have for us on its chances in the Senate?
Well, those are always difficult to prognosticate. And, the bill didn't pass even in the last Congress. So We have to see what we can do in this Congress. Sometimes, as it goes through committee, some changes are made, hopefully that are beneficial so that you can get the votes. But it would go from committee, and unless it's referenced to a second committee, which I doubt that this would be, then it goes up for a floor vote, and then it moves over to the United States Senate. And the Senate has to go through that same process. It would go through their committee, and it would go through their floor vote. And if they voted for it, but if they changed it at the same time, it would then come back to the House to actually concur with that change. And once they did that, then it would go to the president for his signature.
Right. So my only question about that would be, is the bill, such as it is very short. It contains but one line, which is to remove the exemption in the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act, which legally exempts truckers from being paid overtime. And according to various historians and people I've spoken with, the original reasoning behind that, given during the Roosevelt administration when that act was passed, was that they didn't want to encourage truck drivers to work too many hours. However, truckers in America are allowed to work up to 70 hours a week, and most of us do. It's sort of standard operating procedure that most truck drivers work between 50 and 70 hours a week. 60 is a pretty typical work week for us. So we're working that overtime anyway, but we're not seeing any extra compensation for it like nearly all other workers receive. So I'm just curious how they would adapt a one-line bill.
Oh, that's easy to do. First of all, they could adapt it in many different ways. They might want to add something to it. They might want to clarify it. They might want to change the language. And in that case, like I said, that might be done in the House. It might be done in the Senate. If it was done in the Senate, it would have to come back for a concurrence in the House. So a lot of different ways of doing, but a one-line bill could easily be adapted something like just to the point of that original legislation, that statute is no longer in effect. It could be basically that simple, in a little fancier legalese language.
Right. So are you sitting on, as I recall, in the previous Congress, it was in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and I'm assuming it's been turned over to the same committee in this new Congress?
Yeah, I would assume that it is too. And yes, I will be sitting on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. I'm also on the Judiciary Committee, which I just received, which was very nice to hear. So, I'm going to have a busy year with a lot of things going on.
Do these committees, when they're hearing a bill like this, how much input do they seek from, people involved in the industry? Say someone like myself. I forwarded to your assistant a couple of articles I've written, one in Newsweek and one in the American Conservative magazine, outlining all of the details around this bill. And I'm curious to know if the committee will hear these sort of specific arguments in favor of it.
It depends on the bill. If there's controversy, then they may hear pro and con. They certainly, not only does the committee hear, but people reach out, different associations and groups like yours will reach out to the individual congressmen and women that sit on the committee. And, either through email, through a meeting, through a phone call, in various different ways, like you are now. That's another way, through your group. So that's, very often how it's done. Sometimes when you've got a very big complex bill, they will actually have pro and con, and they will have representatives of each side literally speak in a committee hearing and discuss their thoughts on the particular legislation, which could happen as well.
And just to clarify, my group, such as it is me of one.
Okay.
So I want to get your opinion on something, Congressman. So there's a couple of things going on in the trucking industry that affect and are affected by this lack of overtime pay. And I'm sure you've heard the truck driver shortage narrative, where
Yes.
Large trucking companies are always saying they're short drivers. which in reality is a retention problem. They continually turn over people. And one of the reasons they do that is because the pay is not enough to reflect the hours, the sacrifice, the time away from home, and the numerous delays. And this retention problem is actually a consequence and is directly financed by the taxpayer, because these large trucking companies have a sort of stealth corporate welfare program where they receive grants and subsidies to finance their own in-house truck driving schools, right? And I would think that this bill, if you actually have to pay people correctly, like if the market has to pay the market rate for labor rather than have that market rate be distorted by government interference in this way, then we could save the taxpayers some money by having the trucking companies look after their own retention problem. Have you heard this argument before?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily as it just relates to trucking, but as it relates to different areas of enterprise in the United States of America. I mean, there's certainly different viewpoints, how and where and how much should government be involved. And I generally agree. I mean, I like to see government stay out of the private sector and private entrepreneurial endeavor, and I like to see government stay where it belongs. There's so much that we should be doing that we're not, quite frankly, in government. I think that's always the best way.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, the issue is very near and dear to me. And as always, there's all these second and third order consequences, right? Like most of the motoring public, like we referenced your road trip where you got stuck in traffic. A lot of guys spend a lot of time, a lot of the public spends a lot of time on the roads in America. And there's a lot of accidents and collisions and, things happen. And there's a significant percentage of accidents involving trucks are attributed to the lack of experience, because there's always these new drivers coming in. So again, I come back to this retention issue where if larger trucking companies that finance their retention issue by continually training new people, because the cost of that training has been shifted to the taxpayer, and if now they're compelled to pay overtime and they actually make the deal better for their employees and treat them accordingly, you would think that they will recycle less drivers, keep the higher experienced drivers around, and then the consequence of that is less accidents on the highway.
Well, you would think that. I know one of the other areas that certainly have, been affected is just the rate that truck drivers are getting paid, which is more than it ever has been. I mean, definitely the average hourly rate for truck drivers has gone up. And so seeing that, I think, we determine if that's having any effect. And then secondly, the only way we're going to know the answer to your question is if the law was enacted and overtime was given, we would then find out. There's no definite way of knowing. I would be curious, as truck drivers, and you're right, there is a retention problem, where they are going, what jobs they are moving to, as opposed to the truck driving, which maybe they're driving, but not for the same type of long distance or large truck. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of horizontal movement between the industry, but there's also a lot of washout. I've spoken with a sociologist who teaches at the University of Pennsylvania named Steve Viscelli, and he is studying this very question. And he's come to find out that in various states around the U.S., there are in fact hundreds of thousands more people with CDLs who aren't in the trucking industry at all, because they came in, they may not have been paid by the hour. They may have been paid by the load or the mile or some other arrangement, and then, realize that they're not getting overtime. They're being delayed at places a lot. There was a study done by MIT, which calculated that 40% of America's trucking capacity is sitting at any given time at customer facilities waiting to be loaded or unloaded or in some other way being delayed, which, if you're looking at issues with America's supply chains, is a pretty significant problem. And the cost of drivers' time, because it's not being picked up by anybody in the food chain, either by the people who own the trucks, shippers, receivers, or the companies above them that are paying to have stuff moved, nobody's being sent a bill for drivers' time. And that has this onward effect to how our supply chains function. So I'm hoping that should this bill, if it passes, it would correct that, put some extra value on drivers' time, which is not represented at present, and help get the supply chain moving. Because if you're a shipper and now all of a sudden you have to pay for all of those trucks sitting there, well, you'll get them moving, and then that will assist with supply chain flow.
It's a good point. I wouldn't argue with you on that one. And that's why it's a bill worth looking into.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Congressman. I really appreciate you coming on my show. My fan base, so to speak, is mostly truck drivers and other people involved in the industry, logisticians, freight forwarders, supply chain people. I'm sure they're really going to love to hear this.
Well, we appreciate them. We appreciate their work, and that's the point of the bill. And I wish you all the best. And like I said, I want everybody to be safe out there. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Congressman.
You take care.
Yep. Bye now.
Bye-bye.